I saw an interview on the news recently with Hugh Bonneville. He's that guy from Downton Abbey. Hugh's been volunteering in a local vaccination centre. He rocks up in his high-vis jacket and a face mask to greet and direct people who've come to be vaccinated. And I thought to myself, how lovely is that? How cool would it be to turn up for your COVID vaccine to be greeted by the Earl of Grantham or the dad from Paddington, depending on what you watch on TV. The thing is, lots of people didn't recognise him. He had a mask on and a hat on, and they were too focused on why they were there. Hugh was volunteering because he genuinely wanted to help people. This wasn't some sort of publicity stunt. But why is that a news story? There are countless people who volunteered in this way, or in countless other ways. What's so special about Hugh for him to get this attention? See, our very own Jack Plews has volunteered to be a vaccination marshal. Why are the BBC not doing an interview with her? Well, it's because, and I'm sorry to say this, Jack, Hugh Bonneville is more, how can I say it, important. He's famous outside of Finchampstead at least. There's something in our culture that makes us think that famous or important people don't do things like this. Now, we might not use these words, but there's something about it being beneath them. This is because a big part of our culture buys into the concept that success is found in not having to do something for someone else, but in having people do things for you. We're wired into striving for that place of complete autonomy where we can do what we want when we want, where we don't have to listen to anyone or do anything for anyone. How many of us would love to have someone to do things for us? Clean our house, do the shopping, the cooking, the laundry, the gardening, look after our kids. Now, I'm not having a go at you if you have people who do this stuff for you. I would love to have someone who keeps the leaves off my tennis court and cleans the pool and washes my fleet of Ferraris, as well as someone to fly my private jet and keep the minibar stocked on my resort in my private island. Now, which one would you prefer? To have people who do things for you, or for you to do things for other people? Now, I know it depends on who the people are that you're doing things for and what those things are. Any parent of young kids spends most of their life doing things for them. But be honest with yourself. If I was to give you the opportunity for someone to do something for you, or for you to do something for someone else, which one would you choose? Most of us would choose the option where people do things for us, rather than the other way around. I would. It's not really a difficult question. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, which one do you think Jesus spends more of his time talking about and doing? People doing things for us, or us doing things for people? That's not a difficult question either. We know through what Jesus said and what he did that he speaks more into helping others than being helped by others. So let's look at an example of something Jesus did as we delve into this challenging topic. If you read through Matthew's Gospel, that's Matthew's account of the things that Jesus said and did, in chapter 5, you will come across what is often referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus was on a mountainside in Galilee and crowds gathered round to hear him teach. People flocked to Jesus. It was a big deal. For 3 chapters, Matthew records some of the words of this message. Jesus talked about how we should relate to God and how we should treat each other. When he'd finished teaching, the crowds were amazed. They hadn't heard anyone teach like this or live like this before. This is probably Jesus' highest profile moment so far. It's like he's just played Wembley. Everyone in the region knows who Jesus is. The thing I want to focus on in this message is not what Jesus said in this sermon, but what he did immediately after. The first few verses of chapter 8 of Matthew's Gospel says this: "When he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him." You see, they couldn't get enough of Jesus. He really was a first century celebrity. Matthew continues, "A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, 'Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean.'" You see, Jesus is a big deal. This guy with leprosy isn't. Who is the most important person or the most famous person you can think of? Imagine walking up to them and just striking up a conversation. Imagine the Queen came to visit your place of work. I've never seen the Queen, but I'm told you're not supposed to talk to her unless she speaks to you. What's going on here is like some random dude coming up to the Queen, initiating a conversation and asking her to make them a cup of tea. If you're willing, the leper says to Jesus, you can make me clean. It was an audacious thing to say and do. Now, we don't know anything about this man other than he had leprosy. And that's because in this culture, that's all there was to know about him. He was defined by his skin condition. If he was known at all, it would have been as the man with leprosy. He was invisible. People walked by him like they couldn't see or hear him. The contrast between how this society viewed the leper and Jesus couldn't be greater. Jesus is seen as a rabbi. That was the dream job. But Jesus wasn't just any ordinary rabbi. He said and did things that no other rabbi said or did. Jesus was trending at this point in his life. His fame was spreading and everyone wanted a piece of him. The leper, on the other hand, was a nobody. He was less than a nobody. Leprosy was thought to be a contagious skin condition. If you contracted leprosy, you had to leave your home and your family and go and live in a colony for lepers on the outside of the town or village. Never again would you have meaningful contact with someone who didn't have leprosy. You probably would never see your loved ones again. You were pushed to the margins of society, left to rot, literally. You were ignored, but worse than that, you were feared. It was thought that leprosy was contagious, and that's why people with the disease were quarantined together. There was no vaccine and there was no cure. They thought they had to do this in order to protect the rest of the population. These guys really knew what it meant to self-isolate. When people saw you, they didn't just ignore you, they went out of their way to get away from you. If they touched you, they too would become unclean, and at best, they'd have to go through a rigorous cleansing ritual. At worst, they'd have to move in with you in the leper colony. Imagine living in this world, and then you see this guy with leprosy. What do you do? What do you think? Can you see the contrast between Jesus and the leper? Everyone wanted to get close to Jesus. Everyone wanted to see him and touch him. Just like everyone wanted to get away from this guy, everyone wanted to ignore him, to be as far away from him as possible. Everyone, that is, except Jesus. Jesus does two things that this man probably hasn't experienced in a long time. Jesus sees him and he hears him. When was the last time someone actually looked him in the eyes or listened to what he was saying? To everyone else, he was invisible. But obviously he wasn't invisible. Everyone saw him. They just ignored him. I wonder what the crowd and the disciples, Jesus' entourage, thought when they saw this man sitting by the side of the road. Did they try to get Jesus to go another way, to steer him clear of him? I wonder what they thought as they heard him speak. Just keep your head down. Just keep on moving. Don't make eye contact. Just pretend you haven't seen him or heard him. But Jesus stops. He looks at this man. What is he doing? Just ignore him, Jesus. But Jesus doesn't ignore him. He looks at him and he listens to him. And then he does something that is completely unexpected. He reaches out his hand and he touches the man. Now, the literal translation of the Greek word that Matthew uses here in his gospel is that Jesus took hold of him. This was more than Jesus placing a finger or a hand on the man. I think he hugs him. He embraces him. The crowd would have audibly gasped. What's he doing? Jesus has just contaminated himself. He's made himself unclean by touching this leper. But Jesus doesn't care about that. And I don't think it's because Jesus knew that leprosy wasn't as contagious as they thought it was. As Jesus embraces him, he says, I'm willing, be clean. And immediately we're told that he was cured of his leprosy. And I wonder, did they see his skin healing before their eyes? The healing is amazing, but that's not the most amazing thing happening here. It's not what Jesus did, it's how he did it. He could have healed this man with a wave of his hand as he kept on walking by. He didn't have to stop, and he certainly didn't have to touch him, but he did. Jesus chose to look and listen to this man, and he chose to touch him and speak to him as well. When was the last time just one of these things happened? When was the last time someone connected with him like he was a human being? When was the last time he felt physical contact? This man wanted to be healed, but he needed to be loved. Jesus did both. I absolutely love this about Jesus. It's examples like this that inspire me to follow him. It's examples like this that challenge me to be more like him. Jesus didn't just talk about loving people, he did it. He didn't just spout words about how people should live and then do the opposite. He did what he said. This example is full of challenge and comfort. So let's allow ourselves to hear that challenge and to experience the comfort. Firstly, Jesus wasn't too important or too busy to stop and help. How often do we justify to ourselves that we can't get involved because we're too busy? Or how often do we not do something because we think we're too important? We think the task is beneath us. It is really important to have boundaries. It's really important to protect and prioritize your time. But it's also important to make a difference if you're in a position to do so. In fact, this is what Jesus expects of you if you're a follower of Jesus. Sometimes we just have to say to ourselves, you're not as important or as busy as you think you are. Why don't you say that to yourself now? I am not as important or busy as I think I am. Come on, out loud with me. I am not as important or busy as I think I am. Perhaps that's something that you need to tell yourself each day. If this is a challenging area for you, let me recommend the spiritual discipline of unseen tasks. It's really simple. Do one thing once a day or once a week that nobody will know it was you who did it. See something that needs doing and do it. Now, this can be a bit difficult to do at the moment. When you used to go to a place of work, there were lots of opportunities. Empty the dishwasher in the kitchen, take out the rubbish, wash up the dirty cups in the sink. Those tasks where it isn't really anyone's job to do, so nobody does it. Perhaps that sounds like what you do all day at home. You spend your life picking up things after each other. There is often a difference between men and women in this front. I do things to help at home. The difference between me and Louise is that I tell Louise all the things I've done. If she's been out and I've emptied the dishwasher and steam mopped the floor, I will tell Louise as soon as she walks in. Louise doesn't do that. I don't know why we do it. It must be something programmed into our DNA. Perhaps you could embrace the spiritual discipline of unseen acts by picking up that bit of rubbish on the street. Just make sure you wash your hands carefully afterwards. There's a family who are part of FBC who live near us. I've often seen them out with a litter picker and a bin bag, just collecting rubbish. Such a simple yet amazing thing to do. Or maybe you could offer to go to the shops for a neighbour or pick up a prescription. Perhaps you could pick up the phone and check in with someone to see if they're okay, even though you might not know them really that well. The key here is the attitude, not the activity. If you get the attitude right, the activity will follow. Embrace the Jesus attitude where he didn't think he was too important or too busy to help or get involved. Now, the other thing we can learn from Jesus is how willingly he saw the people that everyone else ignored. Who are the people you ignore? Who are the people you pretend not to be able to see or hear? Who are the people who you go out of your way to not come into contact with? Jesus saw them and he listened to them, but he also spoke to them and he hugged them. What's the equivalent of you reaching out and giving them a hug? You might not be able to solve the problem they have or fix the challenge they're facing, but that doesn't mean you can't allow them to feel seen and heard. It doesn't mean you can't add value to them. Perhaps this is as simple as when you walk past that person begging in the train station or in the high street, and instead of walking past like you haven't seen or heard them, acknowledge them, say something to them, look at them in the eye. Let them know that they are seen and heard, even if you can't offer them anything else. See, Jesus wasn't too busy or too important to help people, and he was willing to see the people that everyone else chose to ignore. I wonder if you ever feel like a leper. Do you feel unseen and unheard? Do you feel that there are people who only see one aspect of who you are and then they draw conclusions about the rest? Oh, you're a single parent, or oh, you've got a learning disability. It happens all the time, and it's based on so many factors: our age, our career, our appearance, our education, our bank balance. Perhaps you've experienced this because of your gender, your ethnic origin, your sexuality. This unnamed character knows what this is like. He was the leper, case closed. But Jesus saw him and heard him. Jesus saw beyond those defining characteristics. He saw the real person behind. If you feel invisible, if you feel unseen and unheard, let me tell you this truth. God sees you. He sees you for who you are, not the label that you might be carrying around with you. God stands before you and says to you, I see you and I hear you. I see you, not the thing that other people seem to see. I see who you are, not the image you project or present to the world around you. I see you. But there's more. God doesn't just see you, He values you. When God looks at you, you are the most important person in the world. There is nobody else apart from you. God has the amazing ability that He can do this for all of us at the same time. God doesn't look at us collectively, He sees us individually. And as He sees us, He's filled with joy and delight. Do you need to hear that? When God sees you, He is filled with joy and delight. God's love for you overflows. You are precious to Him. You are valuable to Him. You are important to Him. You're not as important as you think you are. You are far more important. Say that to yourself. I am not as important as I think I am. I am far more important. God loves you like this, and He's asked you to love like this. Don't allow your sense of self-importance to get in the way of you loving the people that God has put in your path. And don't allow those labels you carry around with you or that other people give to you to get in the way of you receiving the love that God has for you. You are not as important as you think you are. You are far more important. What does it look like for you to live like this week?